video. I just wanted to go over some things that we talked about in class today, and hopefully this video will help you with the Go Formative. You can pause it at any time, rewind. I'm basically just going to go over the same thing that we discussed in class so that it can help you while you work on that. So the hours of daylight throughout the year in different locations on Earth change depending on your latitude. And we talked about in class today that latitude is simply the location you are on Earth. And remember, lat is flat. So the equator here is at a latitude of 0. And as we move up from the equator, that's the northern hemisphere, and down from the equator is the southern hemisphere. So we in Ramsey are located at about 41 degrees latitude. So the line graphs you're looking on the Go Formative will have the hours of daylight for certain places on Earth, depending on their latitude. The ones you're looking at are all for the northern hemisphere, though. So you just know that in the southern hemisphere, it's going to be the exact opposite of that. So this link is where I got those graphs. I'm going to take my picture off here. This is simply, the link is on the Go Formative, but I think if you're on your iPad, it won't work. You can go on a different device and play around with this if you want to. But I basically got these line graphs from this website. I screenshot them and are using those in the Go Formative. So here is 41 degrees latitude. See, it shows you here. That's where we are. And this is simply a line graph showing hours of daylight during a certain time of year for us in Ramsey. And we talked about this in our last class. You can play around and move it this way, or you can move it up here. But for Ramsey, in the summer, we have our most amount of daylight hours, 15 hours of daylight hours in the summer months. So when you wake up till probably almost 9 o'clock at night, it's light out. Then we go to December. We talked about it. My birthday, December 21st, is the shortest day of the year where it gets dark at like 4 o'clock, 4:30. So the least amount of daylight hours there. Now I'm going to switch to the southern hemisphere. While you're looking at this line graph here, you'll see it'll change to the exact opposite. Traveling now to the southern hemisphere at 41 degrees latitude there. So if you're in Australia, let's say, they're experiencing the exact opposite of what we are. So their daylight hours are shortening right now because they're going into their winter, where their winter months, their daylight hours are longer, the longest for them. So exact opposite of what we would experience. Okay, so that's where I got the line graphs. And the line graphs that are in the Go Formative are for the equator. So you can see here at the equator, it's a little unusual at 0 degrees latitude because they get the most direct sunlight. They experience about 12 hours of daylight and 12 hours of nighttime all year round. So their line graph just looks like this because they have the same amount pretty much all year. Then we have what's called Tropic of Cancer and Tropic of Capricorn. Don't get wrapped up with the name. It's just simply the name. If you had a globe, you can see, you'll find it. It's at 23 degrees north is Tropic of Cancer, and 23 degrees south is Tropic of Capricorn. And you'll see anywhere in here is basically the tropics. So that's just kind of a name they gave this area where they are pretty much in nice weather all year round. So when you're in the Go Formative, you'll see a line graph for Tropic of Cancer, which is in the northern hemisphere. Excuse me. So they will have their longer daylight hours. They're not that far from the equator, so it's not that extreme. So they have some longer daylight hours in the summer months, and their shorter months are in the winter months, but the daylight hours are not that much shorter because it's still close to the equator. When we get to Ramsey, it starts to change a little bit more, and you'll see again in the northern hemisphere, the more daylight hours are in summer, and the least daylight hours are in winter, where in the southern hemisphere it would be the exact opposite of that. When we get to the Arctic Circle, which is in the northern hemisphere, you can look up here at this globe and see way up there, way far from the equator, their change is very extreme now. They have, in the summer months, daylight all day long and at night. So they don't even have a night. It's just light all the time. It must be something to see. So for several days, it's daylight all the time. Now, That doesn't mean that the ice caps are going to start melting. They're even on their warmest day, it's about 60 degrees. It's not warm enough for long enough for the ice caps to melt. So there's that. Their winter months, they experience 24 hours of nighttime for several days. So they need to take vitamin D so that they can get that, because vitamin D you get from sunlight. So in these months, they're needing that. And in the southern hemisphere, it would be the exact opposite. Their dark days would be in June, July, and their lighter days would be in December. So the southern hemisphere would be the exact opposite in the Antarctic. Okay? So I'm hoping that this helps you with working on that Go Formative. And of course, if you have any questions, you can email me. I will see you next class and talk more about it. Bye.